Jesus is alive.
Good morning, Lifehouse family. You know, I have a very long list of things that I am thankful for. And some things on my list I am extremely thankful for. As I remember the past 29 years of living here in St. Thomas and going to this church, I am extremely thankful for you. Because Julie and I, we knew that our greatest accomplishment was not going to be something that we did, but it was going to be the girls that we raised. And we were actually smart enough, believe it or not, we were actually smart enough to realize there was no way that we could do this on our own. Number one, we desperately needed God's help. And number two, we needed a church family who would live the Christian life for our girls to witness and for our girls to see. A group of people who would love God and love others. That is what you did, and that is what you continue to do. So I can't even begin to tell you how thankful I am for you. Well, recently we have been physically separated from each other as we've been going through the different phases of this worldwide pandemic. We all remember back as we were going through the toilet paper phase. Do you remember that? Not a roll to be found. I mean, we didn't know if we would ever be able to squeeze a roll of Charmin again. Then there was the pajama pant phase, or the track pant phase, where comfort was king. I heard that even the Levi's company and clothing companies like that, their stocks just plummeted during this period, and comfort clothing like Lululemon, it just exploded, and because comfort was king during this time when we were all isolated. Then there was the Little House on the Prairie phase. Everybody just out of the blue started baking bread, baking buns, baking bagels, making banana loaf. This was really a wonderful time of the epidemic. Then it was Zoom time. Everybody was Zooming each other, multiple people on your screen, your computer screen, and trying to help each other out. She can't hear, oh, we lost him. You know, with my computer skills, I didn't even attempt it. But during this time of this pandemic, many of you have been going through some difficult times. Some of you have lost work. Some of you have been sick. Maybe your spouse has been sick. Lots of family issues. All of a sudden, all the kids are home from school, and you have become the teacher, and along with a computer screen, and all of the things that went along with having your kids and family out of school like that. And then the financial issues, you know, the bills keep coming in, the mortgage payments, the car payments, the groceries, but maybe not the money supply. So as the world came to a screeching halt, we have all had more time to reflect and to remember. And you know, we can remember in a negative way that causes doubts, that causes sadness, that causes instability in our lives, or we can choose to remember in a positive way, which causes faith and hope and security. Now here's a little slogan for you when it comes to remembering. We can remember with gratitude, or we can remember with batitude. So you see this morning, remembering is so very important. Just think back How many times has God protected you? How many times has God bailed you out? How many times has God helped you? How many times has God guided you in your life? How many times has God healed you? Remembering is so very, very important. In fact, what we remember and how we remember affects our present and our future. Remembering influences our present situations, what we're going through right now. Remembering influences our present situations and our future decisions. You know, we all know that God allows difficulties and hardships and trials and testing into our lives so our faith will grow, and so that He can reveal Himself and put His power and His glory on display. We're going to look at two Bible stories this morning. The first story we're going to look at, the people remembered in a negative way. The second story we're going to look at, a young boy remembers positively. So in our first story that we're going to look at, God puts His power and His glory on display for all the people to see. In this story, there is no question in their minds. This is God moving in miraculous ways and putting His glory and power on display for them to see. So I'll just give a little background of our story. The Israelites, they've been in captivity. They have been living or slaves in Egypt for about 430 years. God chooses Moses to deliver them from their captivity. And He did this by sending the 10 plagues on the Egyptian people. And each time, Pharaoh, his heart is hardened and he does not let the people go free. Until the very last plague. The death of the firstborn male in every Egyptian household. And God made a way of escaping the plague for the Israelite people. They had to apply the blood of the sacrifice on the doorpost and the door frames of their home. That way the death angel would pass by or pass over their home. Well, that night the firstborn males of every Egyptian household died, including Pharaoh's household. So Pharaoh called Moses and he said to Moses, I want you out of Egypt. I don't want to see you anymore, Moses. I want you to take these people and get out of Egypt. So all 600,000 men, plus women and children, left Egypt. So we're going to pick up the story. We're going to read Exodus 13, 21, and 22. So the Israelites have been released from Egypt. The Lord went ahead of them. He guided them during the day with a pillar of cloud, and He provided light at night with a pillar of fire. This allowed them to travel by day or by night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire from its place in front of the people. So meanwhile, Pharaoh, he rethinks things and he talks to his officials and he says, what have we done? What have we done? We released our entire workforce of 600,000 men. How are we going to get that same amount of work done? So Pharaoh and his officials, they change their mind. They get their chariots and their troops prepared, and they head off to chase down the Israelite people. So we'll carry on in Exodus 14, 10 and 12. And this is what happens. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, why did you bring us here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still there in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves in Egypt. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. So, from these verses, let's look at what the Israelite people remembered. Amazingly enough, they remembered the chains. They remembered the bondage. They remembered the beatings that they took on their backs. And they remembered the slavery of Egypt. And they longed to be back there. They longed to be back in slavery. They had just witnessed God supernaturally inflicting plagues on Egypt and sparing them. They witnessed God putting His power and His glory on display. They were witnessing God guiding them with a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They had miracles happening all around them. Why didn't they remember these things? Why did they remember the slavery? Why didn't they remember these miracles that God was performing for them, which could have ignited great faith and hope and confidence in God, their deliverer, in their present situation that they found themselves in? Instead, Israel, they were less than a week out of Egypt, and they already distorted the past. They wanted to be slaves in Egypt again. So that's what they remembered. Let's look at how they remembered. Exodus 14:11 says, and this is the Israelite people talking to Moses, they said to him as they were at the Red Sea and the Egyptians were right there, they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt?" So they responded and they remembered in a very mocking and a very sarcastic tone. Not just to Moses, but they were doing this to God as well. You see, Egypt, they specialized in graves and tombs. Much of its land was designated to grave sites. These people, they were totally sarcastic and they were totally ungrateful for what God had done for them. They had no faith, they had no trust, they had no belief, they had no confidence in God who just brought them out of slavery. And then once they were in the wilderness, Israel, they just continued to rebel against God. They complained about their food. They complained about the water. They complained they were going to be crushed by their enemies. They complained about Moses and even made a few death threats against him. What and how they remembered back at the Red Sea became their lifestyle. It became who they were and resulted in a lifetime of aimless wandering, many of them dying by fire, plagues, and snakes, and none of them ever seeing the promised land that God had promised. So during this pandemic, we really need to resist the temptation to act like the Israelites. Maybe someone you loved died during the time and you couldn't go to the funeral. That would be a horrible thing. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe your elderly parents are in a home and you haven't been able to see them for months. Maybe you're sick. Maybe your spouse is sick. Maybe you're a young person, you're in school, and you're wondering about your future. What does the future hold for me? What is going to happen in the world? Maybe you're a young couple and your kids are at home 24/7 and they're not able to be with their friends and they're out of control. They're running around and screaming and fighting and your stress level has pretty much maxed out. Well, what and how you remember will determine how you handle these situations and how your future will unfold. So let's look at our second story of a young man who remembered well, which gave him boldness and confidence in his present situation and a future that was blessed by God. So in this story, again, Israel, they were at war with the Philistines. And Goliath was a Philistine champion of war. He was over 9 feet tall. His bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, whatever that is. And the tip of his spear actually weighed 15 pounds. So the total weight of his spear was approximately 35 pounds. So that's quite a bit of weight to be actually being able to chuck it or throw it at somebody. So Goliath was quite a warrior. And every day Goliath, he would come out and he would taunt the Israelite army. He would mock God and challenge a man to come out and fight him. Meanwhile, David, who was just a shepherd boy, he was back home looking after his father's sheep, and his dad asked him if he would take some food to his brothers who were in the Israelite army. So David said he would do that, and when he arrived, Goliath was just coming out, and he was doing his usual taunt against the Israelite army. Well, David, he began to ask questions like, who is this guy? Why is he allowed to do this? Why is he able to defy the armies of the living God? And one of David's brothers, he heard David and he said, David, like, what are you doing here anyway? Like, why don't you just run back home and take care of the sheep? Like, why don't you just go back home? But David didn't listen to his brother, and he found his way to the king, to King Saul. And we're going to pick up the story there at 1 Samuel 17, 32 and 37. So David is talking to King Saul. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after him with a club and I rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and I club it to death. I have done this both to lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. So David, armed only with a staff and a sling, he starts across the valley to meet Goliath. When David gets close enough to Goliath, he says, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord." And David took a stone and he hurled it from his sling, and it hit Goliath in the forehead, and he fell face down, dead. So in this story, what did David remember? David thinks back to when the Lord rescued him from the claws of the lion and the bears. And knowing that God rescued him in the past, he brings that knowledge and experience into his present situation against Goliath. So how does David remember? David, he is full of faith. He is full of boldness and confidence in God as he goes out to meet Goliath. Not going out in his own strength, but he remembers how God helped him in the past. So today, you and I, we have a choice to make. We can be overwhelmed by our present situation, or we can remember how the Lord has rescued us in the past. We can bring that reality into our present situation and say with faith, if God was with me then, He will be with me now. David, he was just a shepherd boy. No one was looking to him. No one was expecting him to fight Goliath. He was told by his brother to go home. He was told by the king he was ridiculous for thinking that he could fight Goliath. But David rejected the negative and he remembered the positive of the past. He brought the memories of past victories into his present situation. Can you imagine if David had have listened to the negative voices of his brother and King Saul? One of the world's greatest stories would have never happened. Your greatest victory may still be in your future. Remember how God was with you in the past and allow these experiences to ignite your faith for the future. You know, the devil, he's not going to slow down. He's not going to ease up in his attack against you. In fact, as we've been separated, and I think a lot of us are just kind of starting feeling a little bit weary, maybe a little bit tired with this whole pandemic, and perhaps letting our guard down a little bit. And the attacks of the evil one, they may even intensify just to see who he can pick off in these times. Now, during this time, allow the victories God gave you in the past to ignite faith for your present situation, no matter what you're going through right now. We must remember well. We must draw near to God, and He will draw near to us. We must remember that this life is very short, but eternity is long. Those of you who are strong in the faith, help those who are weak. God was with us in the past. God is with us in the present. And God will be with us in the future. I'm ending this farewell message with these scripture verses, 2 Corinthians 4 and 16 from the Message version. So, we're not giving up. We're not giving up. How could we? Even though on the outside it often looks like things are falling apart on us. On the inside, where God is making new life, not a day goes by without His unfolding grace. These hard times are small potatoes compared to the coming good times. The lavish celebration prepared for us. There's far more here than meets the eye. The things we see now are here today, but they're gone tomorrow. The things we can't see now will last forever. Lifehouse family, I will remember your kindness. I will remember your friendship, your support, and your love. This is not goodbye, but until we meet again.